Hi, everyone, and welcome to the 60th episode of Battles and Voices. I'm Latika, and I'm the founder and host.
I'm Camden, and I'm the co-host, and we serve on the executive team of Vitals and Voices.
Battles and Voices brings together generations of people involved in healthcare to foster a supportive and connected community.
Please welcome our guest, Lindsay Krasna.
Lindsay, thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited to have you on Battles and Voices. To start us off, feel free to kind of introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, thank you both so much for having me. And yeah, I'm happy to share a little bit more about where I'm coming from. So I'm a registered dietitian, nutritionist. I am also the founder of LK Nutrition, which is a small group practice based in Brooklyn, New York. And we're made up of myself and three other phenomenal dietitians. And our main specialty area is eating disorders, and we also see, people with some other eating challenges. We have some other like sub niche areas, but I would say that's kind of the bread and butter, no pun intended, um, of what we do. And we have an office in Brooklyn. We also see people virtually in New York as well as several other states, and work with adolescents and adults of all genders. So, yeah.
That's amazing to hear. And so your interest in nutrition started early on. And can you share how your experience as a competitive athlete shaped your path into this field?
Yeah, totally. I would say had a big influence in my initial foray into nutrition. Yeah, I was a competitive basketball player in high school, looking to play in college, which I did end up doing. And I think at the time in high school, I was really interested in sports nutrition for selfish reasons, like just really, looking to kind of get any competitive edge I could. And, I was really kind of driven. I loved playing basketball and really wanted to try to play in college. And so, yeah, I just found, the topic of nutrition for particularly sports performance really intriguing. And yeah, that was kind of what initially drew me.
I love that passion of yours, and I love how you shared your journey about wanting to play basketball in college, but you weren't able to, and still you were able to become the successful person that you are today. So it really works out.
Thanks. Sorry, just to clarify, I did end up playing in,
Oh, okay.
yeah, yeah, I did end up, it worked out, but
I am so
yeah,
sorry.
that's okay.
So, over time, your focus expanded from performance nutrition to the psychological and social aspects of food. What drew you to eating disorder work specifically?
Yeah. Well, actually, in college, when I was playing, I would say part of my interest in eating disorders now is that I struggled, at the time with my own disordered eating, complicated food relationship, and you know, I didn't really like know it or understand it totally at the time, but I think kind of similar to high school, that kind of trend of being drawn towards studying what I was going through continued. And, so I think from that standpoint, there was definitely like a personal element of just wanting to um, have, yeah, have kind of more understanding of myself. And then I also found that in school, like in my classes, I found myself really enjoying like some of the courses in psychology and sociology, and and then when I went on to kind of do my training as a registered dietitian or to become a registered dietitian, um, I just remember noticing like so much of the training that we got as RDs was like based on this assumption that, our clients just needed more education around nutrition, and that it was just a gap in intellectual knowledge that, was the sort of target issue. And that really kind of didn't match up with what I was observing with, people that were being counseled, the dietitians that I was observing, and also just like my own experience, my friends and family. Like I would always kind of hear this similar experience described of like I kind of quote unquote know what I should be doing in terms of eating, but I'm not doing it for some reason. And that, I mean, that was just in a small way, but kind of made me realize like, wow, our eating is so much more than just what we know about food and nutrition, and or what we think we should do, which isn't always even, necessarily accurate either. So yeah, I think like that all informed, kind of landing in the eating disorder field. And I think eating disorders just sits at a really interesting intersection of like the physical, social, psychological sciences. Um, so that combined with like my own personal experience, and I think my own professional strengths, like I think not to toot my own horn, but I, I think I am a good listener, empathetic, and have some of the qualities that lend itself well to a kind of counselor, nutrition counselor, and eating disorder. So, um, yeah, that's that's my answer.
I love that answer and like combining it with your why and why you want to work with eating disorders specifically and connecting it to your own experience is amazing. I have my own why into medicine as well. Like finding a why for why you want to do medicine is like I find it super important because you don't want to just say you're doing it for the money. Like
Yeah.
it's important to like have like empathy, like how you said, not to toot your horn,
Well,
but
it's okay to, we should
yeah.
all toot our horns more, I think.
hmm
Yeah.
And having that empathy with patients because you have like a personal experience that connects you a bit more to them is amazing. So sorry, I just have to mention that.
Yeah.
So early, of course. And then earlier, you mentioned that your private practice gives you a lot of creativity, freedom. So, how does that flexibility impact the way that you support your own clients?
Yeah, that's such a great question. Because I would say working in private practice and the creative freedom and flexibility that come with it impacts everything. Um, I would say, from kind of how I go about doing things with clients, like meal planning or not meal planning, doing weights in session or not doing weights in session, food journaling, there's just like all kinds of ways to go about it that I think um, and that being said, not all of those like interventions are necessarily things that are I'm going to be doing with every single client, but there's just a lot of ways that I think working in a private practice setting allows for like really meeting a client where they're at and kind of thinking about um, in offering interventions that are really tailored to them in a way that maybe isn't as possible in other like institutionalized settings. Um, and I think it also impacts like even other things like I can decide how to decorate my office, for example, and like what kind of artwork and what books and kind of what the vibe is that I want to present, like which I think impacts or not that I want to present, but the atmosphere that feels important to create for clients to feel, safe and comfortable or as safe and comfortable as they can. Um, that's kind of on me to think about. Um, also like what resources in continuing education I'm seeking out, the messages I and we as a practice choose to share, like on our website, social media, all that kind of stuff like falls under, um, you know, the responsibility of being a private practice owner, I think. And so, yeah, it's both a responsibility and a privilege, I think, um, yeah, to be able to make those kinds of decisions that ultimately impact the care with clients. Um, yeah.
Definitely agree. And I think what you said about, having more time to be able to talk to your patients, talk to, just everyone. And like when you're able to have that flexibility within your work, I think you can be really empathetic and just meet people wherever they are. So, yeah.
Totally. Yes.
So, eating disorder work can be emotionally heavy. What motivates you to keep showing up, especially on some hard days?
Yeah. Well, a couple things come to mind. I would say the first one is just kind of keeping the bigger picture in mind. Eating disorder recovery is definitely a process. And given that's the majority of the clientele we work with, again, whether it's a formal eating disorder or disordered eating, like changing one's relationship with food it takes time, and inherently there are going to be, you know, harder days. And so I think, um, you know, over time, having done this now for for some time, I can like really appreciate that. Yeah, like not every client is going to be thriving all the time. Like that's just kind of part of it. And I'm going to be holding, some challenging material. And that's just part of the work. And so, I think alongside of that, also like, really celebrating the wins that clients have, with them. It's so inspiring, for me, and it keeps me going for sure. And that, yeah, that helps too, whether it's with that client or thinking about other clients that have, you know, overcome some really challenging obstacles to get to where they are with their relationship with food. I think that keeps me going. And then the last thing I would say is just like my own support. So getting, supervision, talking to colleagues, having just like community and taking care of myself all really help me to keep going.
That's amazing to hear. So you've spoken about how meaningful it is to grow alongside your clients. And how does that growth look like to you as a provider?
Yeah, I love this question. Because I have grown a lot, and I'm sure I'll continue to. And it's one of the things that I love about this kind of work. I would say, I don't know, a couple things come to mind. One is I think I've early in my career, which I think is pretty common for especially like dietitians, because I think we're trained to be fixers, and think of our role as fixing clients, and I don't think that's particularly helpful. So I think for myself, kind of like moving away from that mentality and more to a being with mentality, um, and worrying less about like being quote unquote knowledgeable enough, or um, viewing my client's progress as a reflection of my worth, kind of trying to get out of that mentality and more just, that's not to say, of course, like I'm invested in my clients', care and progress, but there's so much more to what my clients are experiencing than just me. And so, yeah, trying to like really um, be more of a listener, reflecting, offering options, while holding respect for my clients' autonomy, I think is a way that I've evolved professionally. I also think just like being more aware of how my own identities shape, my experiences with food and body, and how like power and privilege show up in the room. Um, I mean, that's an ongoing, um, area of growth, but I definitely think I've grown a lot in those ways. And yeah, I think that also just like working with different people, people who have different identities other than my own, um, and not just identity, but just have had different experiences, which each person I work with does, and I learn from that, and it helps me kind of expand my worldview and my perspective, which then benefits future clients. So um, yeah, I would say. And then I guess the last thing I would say is that I feel like more humility and acceptance that there will just always be a lot that I don't know. And I think I used to be more insecure about that when I first started out, as a professional, like kind of feeling like, "Oh, I have to prove myself." And um, but kind of just, appreciating. I mean, there's some things I know, and but there's a lot in respect that I don't, or relative to that I don't know, and that can coexist with, still being an effective provider.
That's honestly so amazing. And it's so beautiful how you're able to grow alongside your clients, every step of the way, even like during their sad moments or like celebrating every win. So really think what you're doing is amazing.
Thanks.
Of course. So you're deeply passionate about eating disorders within the queer community. Why is this an issue that deserves more attention in healthcare?
Yeah, great question. Well, I think for one, there's pretty clear studies showing that people in the LGBTQ plus community have higher rates of eating disorders than their heterosexual cisgender counterparts. And so, um, I think that in and of itself, just the higher rates is worth looking at. Um, I think there are like unique stressors and factors that impact the queer community, both at large and then individually. Um, and I think, in a way, eating disorders, maybe uniquely to the queer community, can be like a specific way to cope, like a way to kind of gain control, to, in a society that isn't always safe or accepting. Um, and, that could show up as like trying to adjust one's body to be more aligned with specific body ideals, both like within the queer community and the larger society. Um, and then of course, like there's other, like the societal messaging that our identities, our desires, our appearances are quote unquote wrong. So of course that's going to impact like um, someone's, how someone's feeding themselves and how they feel in their body. Um, and then other like systemic factors, um, limited access to affirming providers, lack of family support, food insecurity can also, add to the challenge. And so, um, yeah, for some of those are some of the reasons I would say it's important to me.
That's so nice. Like, that you have like another personal experience within that.
Yeah.
Um, and then being able to recognize that there is a higher risk of it, and hopefully with your clients that you're able to help them in a way. Like, I mean, sorry. I'm sorry, that's just coming out.
You're so good. I'm glad it's not just me. It's hard talking sometimes.
But like you're working so hard with them because of the personal connection you have with them is truly amazing. And again, being empathetic to them because you realize what they're going through because you've talked about it in the past that you experienced that. So, as a queer cis woman, how has your own identity informed the way that you've approached care and created a safe space for your clients?
Yeah. Um, I would say, I mean, I think specifically around queerness, I think just having some taste. I mean, I have, in a lot of ways, a lot of advantages in my identity and how my body shows up in the world. But I think, having some experiences of otherness also, helps me um, maybe empathize a little bit more with whether it's, working with another queer person or someone else who has one or more, marginalized identities. I think it just helps me like be a little bit more sensitive to that. Um, and I think also like my own experiences working through my own, relationship with food and my body, and how like sexuality and gender have intersected with that for me also, um, maybe helps me have again more sensitivity and empathy around like the complexity of how those issues intertwine for others. Um, and yeah, I also think just like as a um, like person growing up, when I think about like my family too, they were I think inclusion was like always a value that was held in my family. I remember when I was a kid, like being on this middle school basketball team, and there was this one girl on my team that didn't get a lot of playing time. And I remember my parents were like, "Hey, you should like give her a call." And this is back when we had like landlines. Like they were like, give her a call and like check in on her, see how she's doing. And um, you know, and I did, and I think, it again, just yeah, like kind of we had a nice conversation, and I remember that as being kind of example of like I think that sensitivity um, to others being excluded was sort of yeah, modeled, and yeah, I could say more, but I'm already talking too much. I'm gonna stop now.
You're totally good. And I really love that passion of yours. And I just love how you're able to, create safe and calm spaces for your clients, who may be struggling, within themselves. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So, what do you think inclusive, affirming care looks like when it comes to food, body image, and identity?
Mm, yeah, big question. I think a big part of it is about recognizing context. And so like recognizing that specifically eating disorders, given that's, my main specialty, like that eating disorders and bodies in general don't exist in a vacuum. That our experiences with food and our bodies are shaped by so many different factors. Yeah, culture, trauma, access to food, all identities of all kinds, biology, systems of oppression, immigration status, ethnicity, race, gender. I could go on. Family, culture, geography, and I think keeping all of that in mind, and kind of contextualizing how someone is showing up is a big part of what, in my mind, inclusive affirming care looks like, or means. And yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's kind of like instead of um, like assuming that there's like a default, healthy body or right way to eat or universal standard of health, like recognizing that it's really relative, to the person. And so, um, yeah, thinking of it less as like, how can we get this client to kind of fit versus, instead of more asking like, what does safety, dignity, well-being like look like for this person? Um, and yeah, um, I'll stop there.
Well, that's amazing that you like personalize it to each person, not putting everybody into like their own like a same little box for everyone that they need to fit in, but everyone having their own triangle, square, hexagon
Yes.
to fit into. And I know we didn't mention this earlier, but reaching the 10-year milestone of LK Nutrition, congratulations, and that's a huge accomplishment. And how does that accomplishment reflect on where you started back later on?
Yeah, it it was a really special milestone and means a lot. As I've mentioned before, yeah, I think I've definitely grown a lot, as a person, as a clinician, as a business owner, as a supervisor and mentor, as a colleague. And yeah, looking back, like I can remember the first session I ever had, that the private practice session with a client. And even though it wasn't my first time providing nutrition counseling. It was my first time doing it under my own, like, you know, uh, practice name. And I remember just being absolutely terrified, having imposter syndrome. Remember being shocked that she handed me a check, um, and that anyone would pay me for, my time and expertise. But yeah, it really it's kind of remarkable and cool to think back to those like early days and how it's grown into something that I never necessarily like expected. But yeah, it's been really rewarding, and I've also really enjoyed like both the clinical growth, but also like the business side of things, funny enough. And like mentoring other RDs in my practice and watching them grow, some of them, who've gone on to start their own practices. And so, um, yeah, it's just all in all, I feel really lucky, and it's been really rewarding.
Yeah. And congratulations on again, just wanted to say that.
Thanks.
And to wrap things up, what advice would you give to healthcare professionals or students who want to build a career that's both clinically meaningful and aligned with who they are as people?
Love that question. The first thing that comes to mind is surrounding yourself with mentors, peers, colleagues, supervisors that, inspire you and support you. I think it's important, not to go at this kind of endeavor alone. Like, we're in a healthcare system and economic system that doesn't necessarily make it easy to balance those things. So, yeah, just like surrounding yourself with people that are gonna um, be supportive has been really helpful to me, at least. Um, and then, yeah, the other thing I would say is just like to have faith that showing up as you are will attract the clients that appreciate you and feel safe with you. Like, you don't have to be anyone else. Maybe counter to what sort of like dominant healthcare training might tell you, or um, dominant kind of professional norms might tell you. Like, I think yeah, being who you are is going to be well received by the people that are meant to be, helped by you. So that would be my advice.
Thank you so much for your wonderful advice. And thank you so much, Lindsay, for sharing your journey, your insight, and the compassion you bring into this work.
Thank you.
Definitely. Of course. Your story is such a powerful reminder how deeply food, identity, and healing are connected and how thoughtful, affirming care can truly change lives.
And to everyone tuning in today, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Vitals and Voices.
If you enjoyed this conversation, then be sure to follow, share, and stay tuned for more episodes of Battles and Voices.
We'll see you next time.